There is a particular kind of silence that arrives when your life begins to come apart. Not the silence of peace, the silence of a room after something has fallen and broken, and you are still standing there, listening to the last piece settle. The plans that felt certain a year ago have gone fragile in your hands. The relationships that defined you have started to feel like rooms you no longer live in. And the person you spent your whole life believing you were has begun to feel like a costume that no longer fits. You tell yourself you are failing. You tell yourself you are behind, that everyone else has it together, that something has gone terribly wrong with you specifically. But Carl Jung would stop you right there. Because what you are calling the wreck of your life, he would call the single most important passage a human being can make. He had a name for it. He believed it followed a structure older than psychology, older than religion, older than written language itself. And he was convinced that the reason most people never become who they actually are is not that this collapse never comes for them, it is that when it comes, they do everything in their power to escape it. So before you try to fix what is breaking, understand what is actually happening underneath it. Because it is not random, it is not punishment, and it is almost certainly not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the only part that was ever going to matter. Jung called it the night sea journey, and he did not invent the phrase. He borrowed it from a scholar named Leo Frobenius, who had spent years collecting the myths of cultures that had never met one another, and noticed they kept telling the same impossible story. A hero is swallowed by a great sea monster. He is dragged down into the dark, into the belly of the thing, carried west toward the place where the sun dies. And there, inside the beast, in total darkness, he does not wait to be rescued. He lights a fire. He cuts himself free from the inside. And when he finally emerges on a distant shore, he is changed in many versions, scalded by the heat, his hair burned away, unrecognizable, reborn. Jung looked at that story and saw the exact shape of a human breakdown. You are swallowed. The light goes out. You are carried somewhere you did not choose to go. And here is the part everyone misses. It is not the escape that transforms the hero. It is the heat. It is the ordeal itself, endured from the inside, that does the work. Which means the thing you are most desperate to get out of is the precise thing that is remaking you. You are not lost at sea, you are inside the belly, and the fire is supposed to be lit there. To understand why your psyche would do something so violent to you, you have to understand a quiet argument Jung had with Sigmund Freud, one that changed everything. Freud looked at a person in collapse, pulling away from the world, sliding backward into old wounds and childlike states, and he saw only regression, a failure, a defeat. The mind retreating from a battle it could not win. Jung agreed it looked that way. But he insisted it could be something else entirely. He called it purposive regression. Here is what he meant. The energy of your psyche, your attention, your desire, your life force normally flows outward into your work, your ambitions, your relationships. But sometimes a way of living simply exhausts itself. The attitude that carried you this far has nothing left to give, and you do not yet know it. So the psyche does something drastic. It withdraws that energy from the outer world on purpose. It pulls the light out of the rooms you used to live in, which is exactly why those rooms suddenly feel cold and meaningless, and it sinks that energy down into the unconscious, not to abandon you, to go and find the raw material that a new self will be built from. The collapse is not your life being destroyed. It is your life being composted. The old structure is being broken down precisely so its energy can feed whatever has to grow next. And Jung found the oldest description of this process not in a clinic, but in alchemy. He spent decades studying the medieval alchemists, and he became convinced they had never really been talking about turning lead into gold. They had been describing in code the transformation of the human soul. And the very first stage of their work, before any gold, before any light, was the one they called the nigredo, the blackening, the stage where the raw material had to rot, to dissolve, to putrefy in the dark. They had a phrase for where the treasure was hidden, and it is one of the most uncomfortable sentences in all of Jung's work. In sterquilinius invenitur. It is found in filth. The gold is buried in the rotting, the despised, the humiliating material, the exact part of your life you would do anything to look away from. And the alchemists were absolute on one point. You cannot skip the blackening. There is no shortcut to the gold that does not pass through the rot. Every part of you that wants to fast forward through this to be fine again by next week is trying to reach the rubedo without the nigredo, and it does not exist. So why does it have to hurt this much? Why can't transformation feel like growth instead of grief? Jung's answer is severe, and it is the heart of the whole thing. He wrote one line, late in his life, that almost no one outside his work has ever heard. He wrote, "The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego." Read that again slowly. Inside you, there is the ego, the I, the part that wakes up in the morning and runs your day and believes it is in charge of your life. And beneath it, vaster than it, is what Jung called the self, the total center of who you are, most of which you have never met. For most of your life, the ego runs the show and assumes it always will. The collapse is the moment that assumption shatters. It is the ego discovering, often for the first time, that it is not the master of the house, that something larger has its own intentions for your life, and they do not require your permission. The terror you feel when everything falls apart is not really the fear of losing your job or the relationship or the plan. It is the much deeper terror of the ego being dethroned. And here is the mercy hidden inside that terror. It is being dethroned, not destroyed. What feels like annihilation is actually demotion. You are not ending. You are being put in your right place so that something wiser than your conscious will can finally lead. Jung had a striking way of describing where these eruptions come from. He said the gods have become diseases. In the ancient world, when a person was overwhelmed by rage or grief or desire, they experienced it as a god, an outside force with a face and a name, something to be honored. We have no gods anymore, Jung said, but the energies did not go anywhere. They simply lost their altars. So now they erupt in us as symptoms. as the anxiety that will not lift, as the depression that flattens the world, as the breakdown that arrives uninvited. What looks like an illness attacking you is very often an unlived part of you, a power you disowned, a truth you buried, a whole side of your nature that was never allowed to live, finally knocking on the door of consciousness, demanding to be let in. It feels like an attack. It is closer to a summons. This is why Jung refused to treat a neurosis as simply a malfunction to be deleted. He wrote that neurosis is, in the end, suffering that has not yet found its meaning. He said a neurosis is an attempt of the soul to heal itself, the psyche dramatizing in the only language it has, something that cannot yet be put into words. The symptom is not pointing backward at what broke you, it is pointing forward at what you have to become. And this is the trap of trying to simply make the pain stop. If you remove the symptom without ever listening to its meaning, Jung observed, the psyche just builds another one. The collapse keeps returning in a new costume until the message is finally received. Your breakdown is trying to tell you something. The question is, never only how do I make this stop? The question Jung would ask is, what is this suffering for? What does it want me to see that I have refused to see? And it is rarely random which part of your life caves in first. Look closely, and you will usually find that the collapse strikes exactly the structure you were most identified with, the very thing you had fused yourself to, the career you became, the role of the strong one who never needs anything, the relationship you built your whole identity on top of. Jung, borrowing from the philosopher Heraclitus, called the principle behind this enantiodromia the tendency of any extreme, one-sided attitude to eventually flip into its opposite. The more rigidly you lived as only one thing, the more pressure built on everything you left out until the psyche corrected the imbalance by force. This is why the people who seem to have it most together are so often the ones who shatter most completely. It was never strength, it was one-sidedness. And the collapse is the cost coming due not as a curse, but as the psyche insisting finally on becoming whole. If all of this sounds abstract, understand that Jung was not theorizing from a safe distance. He was describing something he barely survived. After he broke with Freud in his late 30s, Jung entered a period he called his confrontation with the unconscious. The floor of his own mind gave way. He was flooded with visions. He saw Europe drowning in a sea of blood months before the First World War began. He heard voices. He encountered inner figures so vivid they frightened him, including one, an old man with the wings of a kingfisher he called Philemon. At his lowest, Jung did something that sounds like madness and was actually the bravest thing he ever did. Instead of clawing his way back up to safety, he let himself drop. He deliberately let go in waking fantasy and felt himself fall down through darkness into a depth, into a cave. He went down on purpose. But here is the detail almost no one tells you, and it is the one that might save your life. While he was descending into that abyss, Jung clung fiercely to the ordinary surface of his life. He kept seeing his patients. He stayed with his family. He held to his daily routine like a rope. He wrote plainly that he was consciously aware he was a danger to himself, and that his work and his family were what kept him anchored to the real world while he explored the depths. He did not abandon his life to have the experience. The structure of his ordinary days was the rope that let him go down into the dark and come back up with something instead of drowning in it. The descent without an anchor is just a drowning. The descent with one is a journey, which brings us to the single most dangerous mistake you can make when your life falls apart. The instinct, the overwhelming instinct, is to flee upward, to escape the darkness through forced light, relentless positivity, frantic productivity, a spiritual bypass that floats above the pain and calls it peace, anything to avoid actually going down. Jung's warning here is blunt. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Every ounce of energy you spend pretending you are fine, performing the recovery, outrunning the descent, simply deepens the very thing you are running from. He pointed to the oldest stories, Odysseus, Aeneas, Dante, and noticed that the hero's transformation always required a nekia, a descent into the underworld, not around it, through it. You do not solve a night sea journey the way you solve a problem. You cannot think your way over it or hustle your way past it. You can only go down into it with your eyes open and let it do its work. The way out is down, and the way down is through. So what are you actually supposed to do while you are in the belly of the beast, in the dark, with the fire not yet lit? Jung's answer is the most demanding instruction in all of his psychology, and it is this: hold the tension. When you are being torn between two impossible things, stay or go, the old self or no self at all, hope or despair, every nerve in your body screams to end the tension, to pick a side just to stop the pain, to numb it, to flee it, to collapse one of the opposites and call it a decision. Jung says, don't. He says, stay in the room with both of them. Hold the unbearable contradiction in full consciousness and refuse to resolve it prematurely. Because if you can bear it, and it will feel like being slowly pulled apart, something extraordinary happens. A third thing appears. Not a compromise between the two opposites, but something new that did not exist in either of them. A new attitude. A new image, a new center of gravity for your entire life. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's power to generate, out of held tension, a solution that the conscious mind could never have invented. The breakdown is the tension. The breakthrough is the third thing that the held tension gives birth to. Which means your real task in the collapse is not to end it as fast as possible, it is to stay present to it long enough for the new thing to be born. And this is where Jung would gently take away the last comfort you are clinging to. Because somewhere in you, through all of this, there is a quiet hope that if you just survive this, you will get your old life back. The same job, the same certainties, the same self restored. Let that go. The old structure did not fall because you failed it. It fell because you outgrew it, and it could no longer hold the person you are becoming. The hero in the myth does not return to the shore he left. He washes up, scalded, and changed on a different one. The point of the night sea journey was never to restore you. It was to remake you. So if your life is coming apart right now, and you are sitting in that strange silence wondering what you did wrong, consider for a moment that you did nothing wrong at all, that you have simply been swallowed, the way every person who ever truly changed was swallowed first. The darkness you are in is not the absence of your path, it is your path. And the only thing left to do is the bravest, simplest thing there is. Stop fighting the descent, light the fire from the inside, and let yourself be carried to the shore you were always meant to reach, not the one you came from.